Welcome to another episode of Ramadan Lectures of the World Muslim Communities Council. This lecture is streaming in both Arabic as well as in English. Today we have great scholar Ibrahim Musa, who is the professor of Islamic Studies at University of Notre Dame. He was previously professor of religion and Islamic Studies at Duke University. He is considered a leading scholar of contemporary Muslim thought. Professor Musa has been named as one of the top 500 influential Muslims in the world. Today, he is dealing a thought-provoking subject, the human dignity, pressing need in the contemporary Islamic thought. Professor, it's your time, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum to all your viewers and listeners. And assalamu alaikum to you, Dr. Abbas Bannakal. And I want to thank the World Muslim Communities Council, especially its leader and director, Dr. Rashid Al-Nuaimi, for this kind invitation to speak to your community today. And let me also wish all of you Ramadan Mubarak and wish you every kind of goodness in this holy month of Ramadan. Today our topic is going to be human dignity, and I especially emphasize the idea of the pressing need that we as Muslims must take seriously the importance of human dignity in contemporary Islamic thought, and I would say not only in thought but also in practice. But because we are human beings and we have been endowed with intellect and we have been endowed with the great goodness, therefore we first start from thinking, but we don't only think, but we also practice as a result of our thinking. And so thinking and thought and practice always goes together in the Muslim tradition. So let me say a couple of things. We are in a month of Ramadan. And in the month of Ramadan, we are asked to abstain from three things. During the daylight hours, we abstain from food, we abstain from drink, and we abstain from sexual relations during the daylight hours of the month of Ramadan. Now, what do these three elements of Ramadan, how can we think about how we relate that to the question of human dignity? Think about this. Human beings cannot survive without food. Human beings cannot survive without drinking water. And human beings cannot survive without procreation and extending our race and our species through procreation. These are three important elements of the human existence. Without food, we become emaciated, we become hungry, we starve to death, we get diseased. Without drink or without good and clean water, we as human beings also have a terrible condition on earth. We cannot farm our lands, we cannot clean ourselves, but we also cannot nourish our bodies. And the third element of Ramadan is, which we abstain from and we test ourselves in that, is to abstain from sexual relations and from procreation. In other words, these issues of family and offspring are very, very important. So all three of these issues deal with the question of human dignity. That human dignity are those things that are so essential to our existence, and they form the core of our existence, that without that, we cease to be the human beings that we want to be. Therefore, when we are not fed and when there is famine and hunger, people steal, People do all the wrong things. They lose control of themselves. They lack their self-worth. So the first meaning we understand about dignity is about how human beings understand their own self-worth. What is their worth and what is the worth of others? And what is also the worth of things in nature and things in the cosmos? Everything in the cosmos was given its proper coding, its proper share of things, its proper making, and its proper construction. That is also called its dignity. But let me return to the three issues: the dignity of human having food, the dignity of humans having water, the dignity of humans understanding the dignity of love and procreation. These are such essential elements to human well-being and to human fulfillment in the fullest sense of the word. And therefore, in the month of Ramadan, we Muslims become very close to those, and we fully understand what it is to be hungry, what it is to be thirsty, what it is to discipline yourself in your questions of your sexual relations. That discipline makes us heightened and gives us a heightened awareness of who we are and what our self-worth is and what the meaning of being a human being is. In the month of Ramadan, Muslims are taught that we need to ask for forgiveness. We need to lean and invoke Allah's mercy, and we need to seek salvation. And the way we do that is that the month of Ramadan, we Muslims give a lot of charity. We help others more in this month than in any other month. Why? Because we want to develop training wheels. We want to develop an ability that we have certain characteristics within ourselves. We have certain habits within ourselves that we can give at other times of the year too. Giving and helping others is the highest form of dignity. Now, oftentimes we think that the verse of the Quran that says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُمْ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَرَزَقْنَاهُمْ مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِّمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. When Allah says that we honored the children of Adam, we've conferred dignity on the children of Adam. We give them karramnahum. And then Allah says, we carried them on the land and the sea and provided for them of the good things. And we preferred them over much of what we have created with a different preference. Let's just think about this verse of the Quran for a moment. Most of the time, we think that what this idea of karama, this idea of dignity, this conferral of dignity upon us, what does it mean? What is this karama? This idea of karama comes from the root word kaf, ra, mim, that means generosity. It is actually from God's infinite generosity, from, one can say, from his attribute of Rahman, that attribute of giving, that is the eternal attribute, that attribute of mercy, that is the eternal attribute of the divine. That attribute is one from which we can think that this idea of karama comes from, this idea of generosity and this idea of dignity. And there are many other words that we can talk about. But why are human beings selected for this idea of dignity? Because we carry within ourselves the spirit of the Rahman. وَنَفَحْنَا فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِنَا. So the idea of the Spirit of God, that God breathed into us, the Spirit, the Ruh, into Adam. And therefore human beings have the Ruh, or what we also call the soul, and the Spirit and the soul go together. And we always feel that to be in the place where the heart is. That is precisely this idea that why human beings have been conferred this dignity. because of this spirit, because of this soul within us, and because of the heart, that we have a certain intellect, that we can think, we can reason. That's the greatest gift that Allah has given. So the spirit, the soul, the heart, and the mind is part of a complex understanding of this dignity, because all of them work together. And normally we say that human beings are preferred over all other creation because reason is perfected in us. And because we have the perfection of reason, we can use our reason and we can discover things, and we can be creative, and we can be innovative, and we can be imaginative. Those are the elements that makes a human being different from other species. Yes, other species have different forms of soul and also possibly intellect, as we now discover. But we believe, we understand that human beings have it in great abundance and in ways that are different from, say, what it might be in whales or what it might be in other species. And so this idea that Allah has provided human beings, or Allah has given human beings this dignity, is absolutely crucial. It comes with it is almost a certain status that we have been given. Now, obviously, if you are given a status, you are given a responsibility. And therefore, this idea of being given a karama, being given dignity, doesn't mean that you just carry it and walk around and show off about it. No, it means that with it comes a responsibility. The verse continues, and the verse says that Allah had carried human beings over the land and sea and provided them with the good things. Part of this idea of dignity, that Allah has given us the ability to travel on land and to travel on sea and to have mobility, that we can move around in the world and we can see what Allah has provided for human beings. We can see other nations and people and histories, and then we can understand and have a better understanding what our role is in this long picture of human existence on earth and what our role would be in that. That is why Allah says that we have carried them over the oceans and we have provided them much from what we have created, but we haven't given them a certain preference. I think this is very important to think about this question of human dignity as part of human fulfillment and human development. Why do we travel across the lands and the seas? We want to get to other places where we can find work. We want to travel to other places where we can meet people, where we can create relations, where we can have families, and human beings move around the world and have mobility in order to advance civilization. And that's a key word of civilization. To be civil means to be a person with adab, to be a person with character, to be the person with a certain sense of virtue. And virtue means that we create within ourselves habits of doing the good. Virtue is not to be sitting in the mosque and praying, many, many rak'ats, or reading the Quran several times, which is important to read in the month of Ramadan and outside Ramadan, to read the Quran frequently. But virtue is to develop certain traits within yourself that when you meet a situation, when you confront a new situation, you would know automatically how to respond to that. You're not going to wait for instruction, because you, as a human being, have developed within yourself a sensibility of how to deal with a new situation on which you might not have proper instruction or teaching, but you are creative, you are imaginative, and you deal with that situation. This idea of human dignity is something that I believe that we have not spent sufficient time in thinking about this and developing this idea in our Islamic teachings. I believe we have sometimes been caught up too much in questions of Islamic law and fiqh, and where the fiqh decisions do not take into consideration the idea of human dignity. You give a fatwa, but the fatwa goes against common sense. The fatwa goes against reason. The fatwa goes against the context in which you are living. And then you say, well, this is the rule. That is not fiqh. That is not understanding. That is not using the greatest dignity Allah had given you, which is intellect. It is not the use of that, but the abuse of that. It's the abuse of Allah's gift and dignity. So when we abuse our gifts, we are doing things that are undignified. And we don't only do undignified things to ourselves, but we then also transmit these indignities to other people who come into our sphere of living and operation, our students, our family members, our spouses, our relatives, our fellow citizens, wherever they are, because we don't have self-dignity, and therefore we do indignities to others. We hurt others. Why do you think Islam puts so much emphasis on that a believer shall not cause an injury to the fellow believer? That your tongue should not hurt a fellow believer. It's precisely because the central idea of the dignity in every human being, believer or unbeliever, Muslim, Jew, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever faith they may have, or people of no faith, also deserve dignity. And we have to treat them with dignity. We cannot say, and that's what one of my biggest concerns are, that the reason we have so much conflict and why we learn bad habits at home, it's why do we not learn the proper lessons that Islam had taught us? Why do we not learn these lessons? Because right from the home, at the dinner table, the fundamental wrong teachings are being transmitted to our children. When we do not like somebody, we do not like the habit of somebody, we do not like the practice of somebody, then we'll say, oh, well, these are the Christians. Oh, well, these are Hindus. Oh, well, these are Arabs. Oh, well, these are Indians. These are Pakistan. We use these big terms to denigrate other people. Oh, well, these are women. Women think like that. Must be extremely careful of how we utilize that, because all of that kind of talk, every version of that I just shared with you now, that kind of talk constitutes undignified talk, undignified conversation. And do remember, if you are going to create this habit and let your children learn that from you, that you talk about others in derogatory ways, then do remember others also talked about you in that same way. Others will say, these are the Muslims, and they don't mean it in a good sense. So remember, what goes around comes around, okay? What you do to others shall be done to you. That's important. Let me give you some details about some of the Muslim scholars in the modern period who paid particular attention to this idea of the centrality of human dignity. One is a very, very important Egyptian scholar by the name of Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah bin Daraz, born in 1894 and died in 1958. Sheikh Abdullah Daraz took a number of Islamic teachings and he read them, the theological and juridical teachings, and he basically argued that human dignity performs three functions. It provides sanctity and protection, sanctity and hurma and hifz, sanctity and protection of a human being. Second thing, it provides for the honor, the ird, the honor, izzat or abru, as we would say, and the sovereignty of the self, and that the human beings, the siyadatul insan al-fard, the human beings having a certain sovereignty of the self. And thirdly, that on the basis of that, we are entitled to certain things and we enjoy merit. Three things again. Sheikh Abdullah Daraz explained that human dignity provides for sanctity and protection, number one. Number two, honor and sovereignty. And thirdly, that we are entitled and we enjoy merit. And he says everything else, human dignity comes before anything else. And therefore, we need to think about that if we do not make rules and regulations and practices that take into consideration these elements that I just explained to you, questions of sanctity, the question of the protection of human life, the question that all human beings enjoy merit and that human beings enjoy honor, then we have forfeited any kinds of understanding of what it means to be a human being and to be a human being of dignity. Now, dignity is derived from human nature, but it is also equally reinforced by the discourse and the teachings of Deen. And Sheikh Abdullah Daraz, he is among the few Muslim traditional scholars who was brave and who was honest and unequivocally denounced slavery as antithetical to human dignity. And Sheikh Daraz strongly argues that all of Islam's teachings are based on human dignity. And in those instances where he thinks that we have done bad ijtihad, or where we had not, bad ijtihad meaning we have not done good, intelligent research and understanding the issues, what we call ijtihad, in other words, interpreting the questions according to the best knowledge available to us. When we do not do that, it's because of poor ijtihad that we have outcomes, we have rules, we have certain practices that violate human dignity. There were also other scholars, for instance, Sheikh Abdurrahman Shakir, who also argued that, the degradation of the dignity of human being, that it is so central to Islamic teachings. But I want to introduce a second scholar, a very, very important scholar. His name was Allal al-Fasi. Allal al-Fasi was a scholar in Morocco and also a politician, and he died in 1974. And Allal al-Fasi argued that dignity is the right of every person, whether that person is righteous or whether that person is sinful. And he views the concept of human dignity to be the preeminent divine gift. The preeminent divine gift is human dignity. And, in the same way that I elaborated earlier of how the Quranic verse talks about, that we can travel on the land and sea, he also makes the point that the human ability to travel as the beneficiaries of food and human beings are the recipients of unlimited preferential gifts of the Creator. And what Allal al-Fasi, what he understands from these, to say that from the scriptural references, from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, from the Sunnah, he declares that human flourishing on earth, human development is a fundamental aspect of Islamic teachings. It is not theoretical or rhetorical. We are very good at giving theoretical explanations and rhetorical explanations. And we can speak about human dignity. But what is lacking is the practice. And therefore, part of human dignity is not only human development, that we have to create better societies for ourselves. We have to create situations in which workers are cared for, where there's equality for and justice for men and women, where there are questions of, the environment is protected. Our dealings with fellow human beings, that we as a community do not become a menace unto others. All of these things are central. And another element that we forget about human dignity is creativity. Creativity results in prosperity. And a community that takes human dignity seriously, we will not waste the talent of any child, man or woman, but we will put their talents to work. and we will make them the best individuals, that they become creative individuals, so that they can become a source of prosperity. So in Farsi's view, the human struggle for freedom, the sanctity of human life, the struggle for equality, justice, education, and development. I already talked about food and drink and housing, and food and drink in particular, that is significant for us in the month of Ramadan, and family, and all of these works that we do. He says that we must think of that as in pursuit of the sanctified struggle for human dignity. And he found that the idea, remember the idea of jihad in Islam is not a military thing, but jihad means to work on the self, mujahada. And therefore, Alal al-Fasi said that the struggle that Muslims today have is the jihadul karama, the sanctified struggle for human dignity. If we do not take these elements seriously in questions of human dignity, then I believe that we have forfeited the central teachings of Islam as a faith tradition that does want human beings to flourish, to become individuals who develop in life. Let me give you a few examples. We are today faced with this enormous crisis of the coronavirus. And tens of thousands of people are dying in different parts of the world. Here in the United States, the figures of people who have died is more than 54,000. In other parts of the world, in Europe in particular, people have died a great deal. We pray to Allah that people in other parts of the world do not suffer the same fate, but China had it and several other countries had it. Who do you think are the people who are doing the work of dignity today? The people are the people who are doing the work of dignity today, in particular, but many other people, are the healthcare workers, the first responders, the ambulance men, the fire people, the people who come to get you from the house. In different parts of the world, they use different kinds of resources to get patients from the home. In the United States, they use the fire engines come and help people out, or the ambulance comes, the physicians, the doctors, the nurses, all the support staff, the cleaners of the hospital. These are the people who are showing great courage because they are trying to do the work. You might know that many kinds of doctors are dying, but in the UK and other places, many Muslim doctors have been in the front line of that. We should be proud of those doctors who have served all human beings. They did not ask if you're a Muslim or whether you're a Jew or a Christian or Hindu or atheist when they served. All human beings they served. They are the people who are the exemplars of human dignity. Many years ago, in this town that I'm living in, called South Bend, Indiana, this place took in many Syrian refugees. And the best example of that was that the Syrian refugee found work in some place, but he did not have a car. And most likely the Syrian refugee was Muslim. And this person did not know how to get to work every day. But a Christian woman belonging to a church saw it as her duty to take that person, that Syrian refugee, to his work in the morning, and then she goes and fetch him at night. That is a work of dignity, because that Syrian refugee does not want to be and does not want to live on handouts. He wants to work with his hands. He wants to work with his skills in order to earn a livelihood. But he couldn't get to his work. So the means to dignity also becomes dignified. This woman gets up early in the morning to take this man to his work and fetches him at night to bring him home. That is also a dignity. So all the elements in dignity are critical. Today, tens of thousands of people in different places in the world are suffering of loneliness. From divorced men and women to poor orphan children, refugees, grieving parents and families, people who have been denied their rights as citizens, the victims of civil wars in different countries around the world, the brutal occupations in different parts of the world, or ongoing wars in places like Congo, where wars have been going on and millions of people have perished, but we do not pay any attention to those places where this struggle is going on. We need to think about our role and our duty in ending human suffering and bringing human beings back to the actions and the works of dignity, so that those people can become earners themselves. These people can feel proud of themselves, of what they are doing, and they can proudly then work and feed themselves and feed their families, and they become the agents of transformation and providing for others who are needy and who are in want. And therefore, it is absolutely critical that we take this very seriously. We should also know that the Prophet ﷺ, when he went to Taif and he went to give the dawah, the teachings of Islam to the people in Taif, and they rebuked him. If they rebuked him, it would have been okay. But they not only rebuked him, they then sent out the most hideous individuals to follow him, and they pelted him with stones, alayhi salam. And he started bleeding. He bled so much that the accounts and reports say that his blood got tied to his sandals. It is at that point that the Prophet ﷺ says that, "Oh God, I have been humiliated." And when he is humiliated, he cries out, "Ila man takiluni, ila aduwin yatajahamuni." To whom have you forsaken me? To the devices of an unfriendly stranger or an enemy in whose hands you have placed my destiny? Remember, every time we rebuke a human being, we insult a human being, we hurt that soul in the human being. That individual feels small. The individual feels ridiculed. And that God-given soul cringes. That God-given soul hurts. And that God-given soul then cries out to the creator of the soul and says, "What have you done? Why did I deserve to be humiliated? Why did I deserve to be injured? Why did I deserve to be broken by fellow human beings? Why did I deserve to be expelled?" Then we, through our actions and our neglect, when we do not pay attention to the struggling of human beings, then we become co-responsible for that, because we did not act up in fulfilling the responsibilities, and we did not participate in the jihadul karama, in the sanctified struggle for human dignity. In this very moment, as we speak, there are tens of thousands of people who are in special care rooms in hospital or in their homes. They're suffering of the coronavirus, where they cannot even get their relatives or an imam or a priest or somebody to come and speak to them in the last minutes of their death. They're dying a death of loneliness. These people, through this disease has caused havoc in our lives. This disease has afflicted us in such ways that we have lost our dignity. The first thing is that we cannot work. We're in lockdown. Secondly, we cannot meet our loved ones. Thirdly, that to get food is difficult for those of us who can afford it. We can buy food, but think of those millions of daily wage earners, those people who are working and earning their wage on a daily basis. They have no food today. For many days they don't have. We have to thank and support those people who are going out into the streets of different parts of the world and feeding the poor and the needy. That is the work of dignity. So this disease is not an easy disease. It has hit us at the very fundamental elements of our dignity, of our work, of our livelihood, and our relationship with others. And therefore, the loneliness in which people and the way they die in loneliness, complete loneliness, which is a very undignified way of dying, but yet this is what the conditions that they are in. And so therefore we are in tremendous amount of pain. We are in tremendous amount as a human community. And this is not Muslims and Jews and Hindus, all of us in that. As a human community, we are suffering today a deficit of dignity because of this disease. But even before this disease, we already suffered a deficit of dignity because we have not done enough in our thinking. When we take policy decisions and we make decisions about going to war, we did not use our intellect. We go to war. When we did, wrong things to other people, when we, deny people of their proper income through underpaying them, when we do certain things in terms of investing on other people's behalf and then running away with their money and running away with their investments, all the wrong things that we have done means that we suffer a deficit of dignity. When we kill each other, when we insult each other, these are all indicators of a deficit of dignity. And it begins with the lack of dignified modes of thinking in our mind. And dignified thinking means that we as human beings, and especially as Muslims, in our religious and our theological thinking, we need to utilize all the knowledge of the world that we have at our service today. We cannot say that we're only going to use knowledge that comes from a Muslim source. The biggest challenge to Muslims today and the greatest deficit in dignity in our thinking is that the knowledge of the last 300 years that has been produced, when it comes to building a bridge or building a hospital, we are very happy to take that knowledge and to use the scientific knowledge of the West. But when it comes to understanding what the human being is, the philosophical understanding of the human being, the questions of culture, the questions of dignity, because we now live in a world that is transformed, we no longer live in traditional societies, we refuse that knowledge and we show hostility to that knowledge. And the outcome is that we make decisions that are most undignified. Think of, in the places that you might be lucky that people have stopped gathering in large groups. People have stopped gathering and followed proper health procedures in not going to mosques and so on. But in many places, people are defiant. The reason is that many people who claim to be theologians, many people who claim to be people of knowledge, do not understand the world in which you're living, do not understand how medicine helps us and how certain policy decisions help us in not becoming spreaders of a disease. That is a particular science. It deals with projections. It deals with certain kinds of mathematics to begin to think about how does a disease spread and what are the causes of spread. Lacking that knowledge, we want to go back to knowledge that even Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in the 15th century said, you should be careful about contagion. Ibn Hajar was a major scholar of the Shafi school and a great scholar of hadith, and writes the most exhaustive commentary on the most important book in the Sunni tradition, that is the book of Bukhari. Ibn Hajar understands that contagion happens. And during the plague that he lived through, he fully recognized and saw the horrors of that. Decisions can be undignified. And that begins because in thinking, there's been an absence and a lack of dignity in our thinking. And we need to remedy this. In this month of Ramadan, I appeal to you. I appeal to you in this month of Ramadan that think about the actions that you are doing. You are fasting, you are praying, and you are abstaining from sexual conduct. You are doing these vital things. These three things should be reminders to you for the larger picture, of what it is to be a human being and to be a person of dignity. I will close with a beautiful poem by Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. Muhyiddin ibn Arabi is one of the great thinkers of our heritage. And Muhyiddin ibn Arabi talks about the Kaaba which today is empty because of the disease and people cannot gather. But he thinks about this Kaaba, and he talks about the pilgrims who are walking around that Kaaba. And he tries to tell us a story through this line of poetry about the pilgrims who are walking around the Kaaba. But he also tells it, he doesn't call it the pilgrims, he makes it either the pilgrims are, and the people who are doing tawaf, that they are birds. He says, Tatufu biqalbi, the Kaaba talks. Tatufu biqalbi sa'atan ba'da sa'atin, liwajdin wa tabrihin, wa talthumu arkani, كما طاف خير الرسل بالكعبة التي يقول دليل العقل فيها بنقصان وقبل أحجارا بها وناطق فأين مقام البيت من قدر إنسان. Ibn Arabi says that the Kaaba says that the pilgrim, they walk around my heart. They walk around my heart hour after hour out of passion and out of love. And they're so in love with me, they want to touch my legs. As the people who are doing tawaf always want to touch the Kaaba. And then they says, and they do it in the same way they found the best of messengers do it. They want to do it exactly the way he did it. And then what do they do? But he says, this walking around the Kaaba doesn't make a lot of sense. The intellect says, it doesn't make sense. And on top of it, they also kiss the rock, the Hajr Aswad, they kiss it. And then they says, but the messenger then announces, as much as I am honoring this house, as much as I'm walking around this house, as much as I kiss the stone, فَأَيْنَ مَقَامُ الْبَيْتِ مِنْ قَدْرِ إِنسَانِ. How can you ever measure the value of the house compared to the value of the human being? The qadr of the insan, the value of the insan is far more superior in the eyes of Allah. Why? Because the insan is the carrier of divine dignity. And if we show a deficit of this dignity, if we have a deficit of dignity, we're insulting the Creator. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this month of Ramadan revives and inspires us to become workers and to become soldiers for the cause of human dignity in the way that I explained. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, and I'm looking forward to your questions and your comments. Thank you. Dr. Abbas.
It's really thought-provoking and remarkable. Thank you for this wisdom of words. We have a few comments and questions from our viewers. There's one viewer from Egypt. He is mentioning the book of Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah al-Dirazi, and he is asking you to mention about the book. According to him, the viewer, it's the book of the century. Okay. Could you explain about that more?
Yeah. So Sheikh Abdullah Daraz, he has provided. He's written the Dastur al-Akhlaq, and he's written many books on that. But on the question of human dignity, he has talked about that in one of his essays, in another collection of his, a book of essays. It's called Nazarat fil Islam. In his book called Nazarat fil Islam, published by Darul Arqam in Beirut in 1972, on page 111, Sheikh Abdullah Daraz talks about that. So Nazarat fil Islam, that's where Abdullah Daraz says a lot about human dignity.
How about the constitution of ethics in Quran, Durus al-Akhlaq fil Quran?
Of course, that is also important, because for Sheikh Abdullah Daraz, that book on ethics in the Quran, actually, he interprets that to be from the point of view of human dignity. But in that book, he doesn't speak in great detail about dignity. He basically talks about the values. And one of the things that he tries to do in that book is also spends a lot of time in trying to understand what is the relationship between Quranic ethics and Kantian ethics. Okay. And so he makes certain kind of, comparisons and so on. But he does find that ethics in Islam come first, and that Muslim human beings must think about ethics as central, and that we cannot compromise on ethics, and that the ethical values are not things that are utilitarian. One of the things that Sheikh Abdullah is very interested in is wanting to think that human beings are ends in themselves. Human beings are not means to an end. We are ends in ourselves, right? And that's one of the big things that he's struggling with in that, because oftentimes many aspects of Muslim jurisprudence become utilitarian, and sometimes it becomes so utilitarian that we compromise on the value of the human being or the value of other human beings. So therefore, Sheikh Abdullah Sheikh Abdullah Daraz is very important as a figure in this.
There's another question. I will read it for you. I understood that Allah bestowed on us virtues of dignity. That means Muslims are responsible on preserving the dignity of fellow human beings, regardless of religion and ethnic background. You'd like to know your comment on that,
No, Muslims are not the only ones who have been bestowed with dignity. Every human being is bestowed with dignity, not Muslims alone. But maybe the questioner might be thinking about the fact that Muslims have a responsibility. Because they have dignity, they have a responsibility. They're absolutely right. You see, we hear these khutbahs and talks about Khilafah, we are Khalifatullah fil ard, we are Khalifatullah fil ard. Every Jummah we say that, every Friday we say that. It doesn't sink in. The reason it does not sink in is because we can say all these things about human dignity, but we do not have knowledge. If we do not have knowledge that explains human dignity, the questioner might be thinking about the fact that I think my voice is being echoed somewhere. Someone is playing it back. So anyway, what I'm saying is that we need to develop knowledge systems, modes of thinking in our fiqh, in our ilm al-kalam, in our tafsir, in our hadith studies, in the whole panoply Islamic disciplines, in literature. We have to cultivate dignified modes of thinking. And let me say that there are certain modalities of thinking that we have developed over time that are no longer useful because they no longer meet the standard of human dignity. And therefore we need to put them aside very respectfully.
There is another one. What are the reasons behind giving fatwas and fiqh more interest and important than the ethics and values in modern Islamic discourses?
Well, I think part of the issue is that Muslims have paid a lot of attention to this formalistic understanding of rules and regulations, which we call fiqh and fatwas. And it's precisely there that we need an intervention, that we need to appeal to the people who are doing fiqh and giving fatwas, that we have to appeal to them that they should, very much take seriously the ethical values of Islam. Therefore, I'm beginning to argue that we need to spend much more time in ethics, or we need to utilize the fiqh and transform the fiqh into an ethical practice of what is the good. So what Muslims aspire for is the good. And when we do the good, but the good cannot be the good of the 7th century, of the 10th century, 11th century. It must be the way we understand the good today.
There is some trouble in the video. There is stuck in the video and audio. Is it from your side?
Oh, I lost you for a minute.
Okay, it's okay. Now it's okay. Because
did you get the last my last comment? Did you get it?
Hello. Please, last sentence only. The concluding one I didn't.
I'm saying that if we give fatwas in some corner Indonesia or Pakistan or India or the UAE, and we just think we're going to hand over the fatwa to somebody, and tell that okay, and it is not dignified. These fatwas go onto the internet. They go onto WhatsApp, and then everybody in the world knows what kind of fatwa you have given, and this fatwa doesn't make sense. The fatwa is not dignified because you did not. The first thing that is missing, you did not invest in the dignity of knowledge. Knowledge has a dignity. You need to have institutions that you need to foster institution that is going to advance knowledge, especially in Islamic thought. We can build the biggest skyscrapers in the UAE. We can build the biggest hospitals and hotels and universities around the world in Muslim countries. But we cannot do the most sophisticated thinking in Islamic thought because we have not invested in Islamic thought. And because in Islamic thought, we have not invested Islamic thought with the dignity that it deserves. It deserves the best of knowledge. What we are more interested in is to excavate the knowledge of Ibn Hajar and Ghazali and so on and so forth, which is fine because we are people of tradition. But if Ghazali or Ibn Arabi or anybody would been around and they see how our theologians today and how our religious scholars are ignoring the knowledge of the time and the insights of the time, they would laugh at us. If not more than that, they would scold us for being irresponsible. More questions?
Yes. Sheikh Alal Al-Fasi suggested that human dignity should be considered as 6 highest goals of Sharia. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, according to Alal Al-Fasi, he wrote this book on Usul al-Fiqh and Maqasid al-Sharia. So he understands that the Maqasid al-Sharia is based on those questions of human dignity. So those 6, the 5, Maqasid al-Sharia, for him fulfills this question of dignity. But you see, the Maqasid are no longer only 5, it's also more. So we need to think, for instance, very seriously about Hifzul Bi'ah, the protection of the environment. That's fundamental. Okay? And if we take Hifzul, or if we take Hifzul, human life seriously, we would not become the biggest violators of human rights. So therefore I said, we are very good at talking about these issues about human dignity. Rhetorically, we talk about it, but we do not introduce it in our thinking, and we do not introduce it in our practice.
Thank you. There's one more question. Would you please elaborate on how Islamic discourse on media and mosques should be changed to embrace human dignity approach and not to be limited closed-minded issues?
Yes. Well, that is a long answer for that.
Yes, we have a time. We have 7 more minutes.
7 minutes. So is that the last question you're asking, or are there more questions?
Today.
Is that the last question? Okay. So what I would say is the important thing is that if you want to, create dignified situations, we need to study and understand. You see, oftentimes when it comes to matters of deen, we do not make the best investments. We don't want to spend money when it comes to knowledge of deen, or otherwise we want to be done cheaply, and we want it to be done in the way that we were taught, but we do not want to engage in innovation in thinking about deen. If we are not going to engage in innovation in matters of thinking about deen, I'm not talking about bid'ah, I'm talking creativity. If we're not going to use imagination in thinking about issues of deen, if we're not going to imaginatively think about the meanings of the Quran, the meanings of the Sunnah, and the history of Muslims and so on and so forth, then we are not going to. So there's no easy solution to the questioner's answer. There's no easy answer to the questioner, what the questioner had asked. And that is, how do we do that? What would be important is to not become too theoretical, but go for practical things. So for instance, look at, whatever country you are, oftentimes Muslim women, if there is prayer time and they're in the city, they cannot go to a mosque because there's no facility at the mosque for them to pray. In many parts of the world, it's like that. So they miss their afternoon prayers, the evening prayers, wherever they are. The men can all go because we do not accommodate for women. Second thing is this, that if you look at the fatwas at the local mosque level, what the imam is saying, the kinds of fatwas that they do, oftentimes these fatwas, fatwas are issued that are not based on sound knowledge. The first question then would be, is to ask the imam or the sheikh a question and say, can you explain to me what the knowledge of this, on what knowledge is this based? And is this knowledge still sound? In order for you to make, raise those kinds of questions, you as a layperson need to be equipped a little bit. I don't expect you to become an alim allama. I don't expect you to become the greatest Islamic studies scholar, but you need to have some basic common sense. Common sense. The other thing is this, what you need to understand, that the questions in Islam and the way to answer them is not only in the Quran and the Sunnah, but it's also in human experience. So it's not going to help that you are going to confront your local imam and say to him, but you are violating this ayah of the Quran and that hadith of the he's going to win with you. He knows more of the Quran and hadith than you if you are a layperson. What you need to understand and say, Imam Sahib, this idea that you're having, is there a different way of interpreting this? And let me explain to you what the reality of the world is. Okay? And then in that way, you engage in a conversation. It should be a respectful conversation, because if you're going to have a adversarial conversation, if you're going to have a confrontation, then you're not going to win. So you need to do it with adab and akhlaq, and you need to do it with respect, but you need to have the right to ask a question. Okay? And you have to, be kind, maybe invite the responsible person, invite the person home for a cup of tea, or go to a restaurant and talk and say, I have some questions. Are there ways in which we can address this in a different way? So it comes that the Prophet always has said, that the remedy of a problem, of a difficult issue, is in asking question. Shifa'ul ayy as-su'al. Alaysa fi shifa'ul ayy as-su'al. So you need to ask question, but there's how you ask the question. Okay. The other thing is this, that we need, if you are responsible for a mosque, if you're responsible for institutions, invest in the next generation of Muslims who can become thinkers, who can be engaged in very sophisticated Islamic thought. If you have people who are good graduates from madrasas or from Darul Ulooms or from institutions wherever they are in the world, then help them to go to the next level of knowledge advancement, because those people have the skills, but new knowledge advancement will help them to interpret those issues in ways that will be helpful to the society. It will not be only about being orthodox and be traditional to the way that my forefathers did it, but those individuals with the proper skills will be able to interpret and articulate Islam in a way that will be conducive to the Muslim public, but also conducive to the world, and it will work. It will have dignity. So coming back to dignity, dignity is not about talking about it, it's doing things. And doing things means you have to put your hands into the pocket and spend in the right areas and not engage in wasteful activities. Unfortunately, for very serious intellectual efforts and work, Muslims are very quick to build a mosque, but they're not very quick to build a serious school. We're building a lot of schools all around the Muslim world, but these schools are mediocre. They're human dignity seriously. Me and Ramadan Mubarak and Kareem to all your listeners and viewers, and be safe and